right, welcome to Scrap Talk. Today we have a very special episode. One of my all-time heroes, one of anybody that's followed MMA, one of their heroes, Randy the Natural Couture. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being on. It's a very special honor for us. When we get started here, one of the things we talked briefly just before we got started, how you went to college at Oklahoma State, and you wrestled there. How did you get started into MMA though from wrestling?
On a whim. I was assistant wrestling coach at Oregon State University after I graduated from Oklahoma State. I was coaching there. One of my athletes in 1996, August, all the athletes came back into town. Corvallis is a small town, small college town. Mm-hmm. And all my guys were coming back in. I lived in the same apartment complex as some of the guys. And one of the guys ran over. He's like, "Oh, man, you got to see this." And he plugged in this VHS tape. Yes, it was that long ago, a VHS tape. And it was that particular fight was a UFC with Don Fry fighting on that card. And I went to college with Don Fry at Oklahoma State. His senior year was my freshman year. So I'm like, holy crap, look at that. I know that guy. I went to college with that guy and watched him fight and was, immediately intrigued by the sport. But I didn't think anything of it, honestly. And was still wrestling and coaching, wrestling for the national team in Greco and coaching at Oregon State. That next year, that year in December, we had the College Invitational in Vegas every year. That particular year was at State Line. Instead of being in Vegas proper, it was down at Buffalo Bills Arena there at State Line on the California border. And one of my friends came to watch the wrestling. He was a wrestler too. And he said, "Oh man, after the finals, we're having a beer, just shooting the crap." And he said, "Oh man, did you see that UFC thing?" And I said, "Yeah, I saw a video of that. It's pretty crazy." He said, "Yeah, man, you should do that." And I'm like, he's like, "No, I know how to get the application. I'll go get the application and send it in. You should do that. You'd be good at it." And I thought, I didn't think anything of it. And he went home and he did. He got the application. He filled it out. He sent it in. And they put him off. They said, "Oh, we got enough wrestlers. We want more exotic martial artists. But we'll put him on the alternate list." Then he called me and told me that's what they said. And I was like, okay, no big deal. I didn't think anything about it. Went on about wrestling and doing my thing. Spring of 97 rolls around and I get a phone call out of the blue. Say, "Hey, you're on our alternate list. We got a tournament in 3 weeks. We're having trouble filling a spot in the heavyweight tournament. Do you still want to fight?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to fight. That sounds like a great idea." So I literally jumped in on 3-week notice for UFC 13 in the heavyweight tournament. And that's what got the ball rolling for me.
I know
first fight, I fought twice that night. Tony Hollema and Stephen Graham. And that was it.
And so your first ever fight was in the UFC, and that's unbelievable. I mean, I know it was early days UFC, but still, you didn't start at a regional promotion. You know what I mean? Like you started in your first.
There really were no regional promotions back there. There was no amateur sport back then.
Yeah.
There was, I think, only one other promotion in the sport. I think it was Extreme Battlecade was the only other promotion in MMA at that time, and it was called No Holds Barred back then. There were only a couple of rules on the books. You couldn't eye gouge, you couldn't bite, you couldn't groin strike, and you couldn't fish hook. Other than that, it was the Wild Wild West. You could do whatever the hell you wanted. Wear shoes, don't wear shoes. Wear gloves, don't wear gloves. Wear a gi, don't wear a gi. It didn't matter. It was crazy. And they started adding rules almost every single show. There'd be a new rule or two as they ran towards regulation to get the sport approved.
So you count that as one of your UFC championships because I know you won that tournament. You beat Holman and Graham. So
I won that tournament, but that didn't put me in a title. I won the tournament. They wanted me to fight in a super fight in the next show in October. That's what put me in the fight with Vitor Belfort. And they told me, look, the winner of this fight, this super fight, is going to get a shot at the title. The new heavyweight champ at that time was Mark Coleman. He had, he was the champ, and then he just got beat by Maurice Smith, a very, very good kickboxer from
Mhm.
Seattle, my hometown. I was at that fight. I watched that happen. So if I beat Vitor Belfort, I was going to get a shot at Maurice Smith, the fight for the title in the heavyweight division.
And so, and I know you fought Vitor later in your career, but when you first started training, like, how was that, like the transition from the early days when you talked about being the Wild West to like transitioning later in your career when you're fighting Vitor the second time in the more modern type era? Like, how did your training vary on that?
It didn't train, tactically, I didn't have to change that much. I knew Vitor very well from fighting him the first time. We'd studied him. I think at that time he'd had 4 fights in the UFC, and he had an aggregate time in those 4 fights of about 3 minutes. I mean, he was just blasting through everybody. Um, I knew if I could get my hands on him, deal with his striking and his explosive power, and get my hands on him and make him wrestle me, I had a good shot at beating him and wearing him down and winning. And that's exactly what we did in the first fight.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously we, like I said, we ran towards regulation, ran towards rules, and eventually they came up with unified rules through Larry Hazard in the state of New Jersey. They implemented unified rules for MMA. Um, they were the first to do that. Those rules at some point got widely accepted across the country as the sport became sanctioned in every state in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when I ended up fighting Vitor later, the second time, that was obviously when Dana White and the Fertitas had taken over the brand and again continued to run towards regulation. We went to rounds, 10-point must system, and all those things we were kind of used to from boxing.
Mm-hmm.
So training for, uh, you know, the original version of the sport, you fought 15 minutes straight. And then you got 2 3 minute overtimes if nobody won the fight via knockout or submission after that. And then they judged who won the fight based on those 3 rounds, a 15-minute go and then 2 3 minute overtimes. Now we're in a 5 point, 5 minute round system, 3 rounds for a regular fight, 5 rounds for a championship fight. And so fighting Vitor the second and the third time was under that system, a little bit different. I knew if I took him down and got my hands on him in a 15-minute round, he probably wasn't getting back up. um, Different when with a round system kept the fights moving and you started every round in the standing position. So I mean I had to train to get my hands on him and take him down or nullify his striking in each of the 5 rounds of that title fight. A little bit different approach, but the goal was the same: still close the distance, make him wrestle me as much as possible, take that gas out of him, that explosive power out of him. Obviously, the second fight didn't go very well. Um, it didn't go badly. I got right where I needed to be, but I got grazed by a punch, and the old glove had a raw seam around the fingers, and that raw seam sliced my eyelid from the top to the bottom. My eye slammed shut. Thankfully, John knew what he was looking at, and there was something wrong, so he stopped the fight in the first 25 seconds. The doctor literally came in and did that to my eye. And as soon as she opened my eye, the blood started pouring out and ended up calling the fight. Um, because of that was, your eyelids are the windshield wiper to your eye. They're pretty important for your vision. So there was no way I could continue to fight with the cut and ended up getting a rematch about 90 days later after I was healed up. The real bummer part of that was Vitor's sister had been kidnapped and ultimately dispatched because uh, in Brazil, they saw Vitor on television. They assumed he had tons and tons of money. They literally kidnapped his sister and held her hostage for ransom. Obviously, Vitor wasn't made of money, and they horrible, but he lost his sister in that endeavor. So he was dealing with all that while I was trying to recoup from an eye cut and figure out how to,
Hmm.
how to get where I needed to be to fight him in the third fight, the rematch. So crazy situation, but obviously the third fight went the way I thought the second fight probably would have went had I not gotten cut.
I remember being really disappointed in that fight because I was mad they called it a TKO win for him because I was like, it was an accidental cut and I thought it should have been a no contest. And I was so mad because I still thought you should have been the champion still.
It wasn't. It was nothing illegal about the technique that caused the cut, so they had to call it what it was and give him the victory. I didn't disagree with that. Nothing he did was his fault. He grazed me with that glove, and because of the nature of the glove, it lacerated my eyelid. I mean, it is what it is. That's fighting.
Yeah, well, yeah. At that time, was you still at Real American Wrestling, or did you transition to Team Quest at that time?
I had not been with Real American Wrestling for a while at that stage of
Okay.
things. It was really my first year and a half in the sport that I was with Rico Chiapparelli and Lou Chiapparelli and Real American Wrestling.
Oh,
By that time, after 2000, we started Team Quest. Matt Linlin, Danny Henderson, and myself and Robert Follis founded Team Quest in 2000, and we were off and running with all the guys at Team Quest in that amazing gym.
that was, I mean, you had Evan Tanner and Lenlin Henderson.
Yeah.
You had a wrecking crew at that gym.
We had an amazing cast of guys in that gym. You could have sold popcorn to those workouts.
I would have gladly went to those.
I was going to ask you, Randy. I mean, you got the job done against him under both rule sets, but I mean, we've talked some about how, and you hear people talk about how the advantage goes to the striker, bringing the fight back to the feet. Do you have a take on that? And I'm relatively new to the sport. I guess I didn't realize that a lot of these rule sets were geared towards regulation. I don't know if that specific rule makes the sport safer, but I mean, would you like to see a rule change where, that advantage is taken away and go back to?
I think it's important to be a well-rounded fighter. And certainly from a wrestler's perspective, once I got a guy down, he was going to have a lot of trouble getting away from me and getting out from underneath me. Not everybody wanted to see two guys fight on the ground for 15 minutes straight. So I think in running towards regulation and also running towards becoming a mainstream sport, adopting some of the things that we were used to from boxing was important. There was already a stigma attached to the cage. You get, I mean, people would literally look at me like, oh my God, you're one of those guys that gets in a cage and fights people.
Mm-hmm.
Like somehow I'm a criminal and I might bite them or beat their ass right there on the spot.
Yeah.
Simply because of my chosen profession, which was, a misnomer. Most of us weren't criminals. We weren't bad people. We weren't thugs.
Yeah.
Or most of us were college educated guys that this was our opportunity to be a professional athlete in our society, which is a pretty big deal. So I think the regulation made the sport more exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It ran towards boxing, and a 10-point must system and rounds made it easier to determine who won or lost the fight. And so I think in the grand scheme of things, it was where we headed and where we are now was the right place to go.
Gotcha.
That's good. We'll backtrack just a tiny bit. Before your fights with Vitor, you'd been a heavyweight champion, and then they brought you in to fight Chuck Liddell for the interim light heavyweight championship at UFC 43. And that's when I discovered you. And like I said, that's when I became a Randy Couture fan because I didn't know anybody at that time. I'd watched the Pride fighting by accident before that because I thought it was pro wrestling. Then I fell in love with the sport. But your fight with Chuck Liddell, did you feel like they brought you in because they thought you're kind of, because you started your career later in life anyway, and they think they thought maybe you was past it and they was trying to make him the champion?
You're absolutely correct. I'd kind of been the fly in their ointment, with the old owners of the UFC. When I beat Vitor that first time, Bob Meyerowitz was literally in the booth in the truck, jumping up and down. I just beat their phenom, this young, good-looking kid that they were sure was going to bring all the Latin American crowd in and the South American crowd in and all that. And I was a fly in the ointment and beat their phenom. And I think the same was true with the UFC when Zuffa took over, when Dana White and the Fertittas bought the brand from Bob Meyerowitz. They immediately signed Pedro Hizzo to a 9-fight deal, the biggest deal that anybody had ever had. And that was my first fight with the new company under the new ownership. And they were sure that, he was going to beat my 40-year-old butt, and they'd have this new young Brazilian in the heavyweight championship. They didn't think, they felt like I was very marketable at my age and all of that stuff. And so they were counting on Pedro Hizzo to take me out and they'd be done with me. And then obviously I won that fight. And I think that very first Vitor fight literally in many ways set the tone for my entire career. I think because I was an older fighter, I was always the underdog, and the company didn't think I was very marketable. So they were always trying to find ways to get me beat and get me out of there. And I managed to find my way through a lot of those fights that I was in their eyes supposed to lose.
So you mentioned your fight with Pedro Hizzo. I heard this one time on the internet, so it has to be true. They said you have a permanent dent in your leg from Pedro kicking you. Is that true?
That is true. That is true.
That's really true.
I have a dent in my left quad where Pedro kicked me. He kicked me 14 times in that fight. And everyone in that lead leg, right in that same spot, my thigh turned black and swelled up by the end of the evening. By the time I got back to my room that night, I could hardly walk. Want to talk about wanting to smack a massage therapist? Oh my God. I had to go get, physical therapy after that fight for 3 weeks to get all that blood that kind of settles in between your fascia and your epidermis, your skin. There were these little pockets of blood that you could chase around like a little alien in my thigh. And I had to get that massaged out or it would crystallize and cause problems in my quad muscle. And one of those spots, he was very, very good at what he did. He hit me in the same spot almost every single time he kicked me. And that little piece of quad muscle's like, the hell with you. I'm done. I'm not coming back.
That is
so
wild.
I have a dent. I definitely have a dent right there in that quad.
That's wild. I always thought that was like a, old wives' tale, but I guess that's true. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, if I wasn't wearing pants right now, I could show you, but we won't go there on the podcast.
I appreciate that. When you talked about like your time at Team Quest and that wrecking crew of guys you had, Matt Lindland, Olympic silver medalist, you had a bunch of wrestlers, but your striking when you fought Chuck Liddell, I mean, you was out striking him, and that everybody didn't think that was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Who was you training with there to get your striking so on point?
We had a coach at Team Quest, and striking was one of the first things I knew I had to learn. And that actually caused the rift and with me leaving my assistant coaching job to pursue fighting full time. I had to go down to Boxing Works in Hermosa Beach with Scotty and Tony and learn some boxing to get ready for Vitor, that first fight with Vitor, because he was tearing guys up with boxing. His jab cross combination was very, very explosive. And if you stood around in front of him, he was going to blow through you. And he'd done that several times, including Vanderlei Silva and many other guys, even after I fought him. So I started the boxing journey then, learning the boxing and the striking stuff to go with my wrestling background. And I was in the process of trying to learn as much as I could about jiu-jitsu at that time as well. And it was hard to find black belts in jiu-jitsu that would train with us. And when we were willing to share our wrestling knowledge and those transition skills for that jiu-jitsu knowledge on the ground and what the jiu-jitsu guys were doing. We couldn't find too many guys that were willing to train with us. So that was part of it. We kind of came in on this second generation of MMA fighters that were running towards cross training, trying to learn all the other stuff and be a well-rounded fighter. And striking and jiu-jitsu were certainly part of that process for me. Dave Hagen was a kickboxing coach for us at Team Quest, and a great guy. He was a military guy, a veteran as well, so him and I hit it off. And he was my striking coach through that whole camp to get ready for Chuck, me coming down to light heavyweight and fighting Chuck for the interim title. This is back in the days when Chuck and Tito, Tito was the champ, and he wouldn't give Chuck a shot. Chuck was the number one contender. There was supposedly this gentleman's agreement that they were friends and they would never fight. Now Chuck says that's bullshit. There was no such agreement. He wanted his shot. And Tito said, no, we're friends. We said we wouldn't fight each other. So there was the rub. They were going to strip Tito of the title. They wanted me, I just suffered 2 losses in the heavyweight division. I had one more fight on my contract. They asked me if I'd come down and fight at light heavyweight. I said, hell yeah, I'll fight the interim title at light heavyweight. I think they were sure I was going to have my 3rd loss. They would cut me. Chuck would be the new interim title champion in the light heavyweight division, and really put some heat on Tito to step up and fight Chuck. I ended up winning that fight, becoming the new champ. They asked me if I would fight Tito. I said, of course I'll fight Tito. So I unified the titles as the interim champ and beat Tito to become the bona fide champion in the light heavyweight division. But that fight, I had to make friends with the possibility that Chuck could knock me out. He'd been knocking guys out. He had this unique ability with those long levers of his, those long arms, to catch guys right on the end of those punches. And he was very, very good at it. I'd studied him, watched a lot of his fights, and kind of knew what I was in for. And I just made the decision that I was going to hit him first. If he was good enough to knock me out and catch me, then so be it. I had to make friends with that possibility, but I was going to step in the pocket and I was going to hit him first and try and get him off balance. And that absolutely worked. And if you look at the difference in his fighting style from the first fight to the second and the third fight, he became a different fighter because of that loss, because of that fight with me, and stepping in the pocket and hitting him first and taking him down. I don't think anybody had really taken him down at that point. And Dave was a big part of my camp and helped me a bunch prepare to close that distance, throw that overhand right, follow that with that double leg, bounce him off the fence, use that trampoline effect to put him in the air and put him on the ground. And that's exactly what happened in that fight.
Hey, and you said put him in you picked him up at one time, I remember, over your head. That's one of the best takedowns in all the highlight history you had on that, on top of all the times you were just beating him on the feet. It was an amazing fight. Your whole career, you fought guys like Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, Vitor Belfort, Tim Sylvia. The list goes on and on and on. Like, you have the who's who list of a resume. Is there one fight you didn't get that you really, really wanted?
I think everybody knows the Fedor fight never happened. He was the king of the hill in Pride at that time. Had fought just about everybody that Pride would dish up for him. Mirko Krokop on down the line. I mean, he fought a killer's row of fighters in Pride. Most rankings at that time had him ranked number 1 in the world and me number 2 in the world. I was the heavyweight champ for the UFC. So that was the fight I was pushing. I was pushing Dana and Lorenzo to make that fight happen. They had negotiations going on with M1 and Fedor's handlers. They'd agreed on money, but M1, who kind of controlled Fedor's destiny, basically, wanted to do co-promotion. They wouldn't just let him sign a contract to fight in the UFC. They wanted a co-promotion. The UFC was not willing to put M1 on the map by doing a co-promotion with them. And that's why that fight never happened. And I chased it and spent a lot of my own money trying to make that fight happen for a while, for 13 months. And ultimately I had to give up the notion that fight was going to happen. He ended up signing with Strikeforce. Danny Henderson ended up getting to fight him later down the road and beat him in the U.S. And he lost a couple in Strikeforce and then Bellator. But I never got to fight him. So that was the one that should have happened and could have happened. And that would have been a Super Bowl of fights. The Pride champ versus the UFC champ in the heavyweight division would have been a huge fight.
100%. That would have been. That's a fight that I always wish I'd have got to see too. That we never had the pleasure to see. But I think that would have been like any other fight of your career, where they would have thought you was the underdog and you came out and showed why you were the champion.
Well, he posed some interesting problems. He had great grappling. He was a very good judo player and sambo player. He had an amazing overhand right, which was a weapon and a tool I used a lot. So in some ways, we had very similar styles. It would have been interesting to figure out how to solve the problem that he posed. Because that's what fighting is. Fighting is problem solving.
How would have you tried to fight him? Because you mentioned he strikes and grapples, and what would your plan been to fight a guy like that?
I think get to the clinch, use the fence, dirty box, Use some of that Greco background that I had to stifle guys, smother guys, take gas out of guys, wear them out, make them pummel, make them fight off that fence, especially for the first round and a half. And then maybe try to open up, put him on the ground, make him fight from his back. He was going to have trouble submitting me or getting me out of position as a solid wrestler. So it would have been interesting to try and see how that fight would have went and how to solve those problems.
Well, is there anybody today that like you could have a dream fight like your prime versus now? Was there anybody you would wish like, man, I wish I was, that guy was fighting when I was, and we could, stylistically matched up well or anything like that?
I never really thought in those terms. Obviously, there are a lot of great fighters, and I had a lot of great competition against a lot of tough guys. The Fedor fight was the only one I really chased and really wanted to see happen, but I never really had a hit list or, I want to fight that guy or that guy. And, I think the sport continues to evolve. We're in this kind of third generation of fighters now that saw what we were doing. I consider myself part of this second generation of fighters that started cross training and learning all the other stuff. All these third generation fighters saw us when they were kids and like, that's what I want to do right there. They don't care about a belt. They don't care about none of that. They want to be a well-rounded mixed martial artist and work their way up the ranks. So I think we're all enjoying the tactical and technical expertise of a lot of these third generation fighters now. There's a ton of great fighters, and it's become a global sport.
Yeah.
Not just an American, Japanese, or Brazilian sport, but there's fighting going on all around the globe.
So was the first generation of the sport more like we want to take the best karate guy versus the best judo guy, and what style of fighting is the best? That was kind of the first generation.
Exactly. Everybody was out to show that their martial arts style was the best style. And I think what we quickly realized is there was no one martial arts style that encompassed everything you needed to know. You had to cross train, you had to learn. And I think, exactly how this sport grew was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The Gracie family wanted to show the expertise and brilliance of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They wanted to use this, and they had this standing house fight check of 50 or 60K to anybody from any martial arts style that could come into one of their dojos and beat their number one student. To my knowledge, they never gave that check away, ever. And it was that mindset that Jorge and Gracie and the Gracies, with Art Davies' help, put all the pieces together to grow this new fledgling combative sport. And in many ways, they revolutionized martial arts. The 1-inch punch, the Hollywood BS, frankly, went away when we got to see real competitors, real athletes get in that cage and answer a lot of questions.
We was talking about the transition, one of the third generation. Who are some of the guys you enjoy watching now, or do you follow the sport real closely anymore, or do you still?
Obviously, I'm involved in commentating for the Professional Fighters League. I've been doing that for the last 8 years. We got our 9th season coming up here in April in 2026. They changed the format a little bit this last season to a single elimination tournament. It was a world tournament. We had 25 countries involved in last year's tournament. It was amazing. There's a ton of amazing athletes. We've seen guys like Magomed Kirmov, a bunch of these Dagestanis that have hit the scene. Kayla Harrison coming out of the PFL and probably, in my opinion, the best female fighter in the sport right now. You're going to see her fight Nunes here in a title fight in the UFC. She made the transition from the PFL to the UFC, beat Holly Holm in pretty significant fashion, and now is going to fight Nunes. So that'll be interesting. Kayla's an amazing athlete, an amazing person. Big fan of hers. Michael Chandler, one of my favorite fighters. I love watching Michael fight. I wish Michael would wrestle more and make more guys wrestle him. I think he'd be having more success if he but he wants to be exciting. He wants to continue to get the nod from Dana White. So that means he's going to have to stand and try to strike with guys. It's unfortunate, but I think he'd be winning a lot more fights if he'd use his wrestling more. But he's one of my favorite fighters to watch. There's a ton of amazing fighters out there right now that are tactically and technically proficient. The science of athletics has come so far that we're going to see a lot more fighters fight well into their 40s like I did.
Well, I praise you for that, because I fought in my mid-20s, and I quit in my late 20s, and I tried getting back into it in my late 30s and broke my freaking leg. So I decided in my late 30s it was time to retire. So I pray. I mean, I just have all the praise in the world for guys that keep doing it, because it's way harder than it was 10 years ago for me. So,
well, and I think I was fortunate and I didn't sustain any real injuries that kept me out of training for very long. I think the worst is, the Rico Rodriguez fight where I caught the elbow and fractured the orbit. And anytime you're messing with your vision, that certainly gets your attention. That's the only time my mom called me. It's like, hey, maybe it's time to think about doing something else for a living. I'm like, come on, Mom, I'm all right. I'm gonna be fine.
She's worried about her baby boy.
Yeah. But yeah, I think you got to stay on top of it, stay as active as you can. I see that in some of these young fighters. They're either celebrating or commiserating after a fight, whether they won or lost, and then they don't get back in the gym for a month. And they backslide so far that now they're trying to get their butts back in shape and back up into fighting shape. When if they'd have taken a week off and gotten back in the gym and gone in there and had some fun and just training and staying in the training environment, that steep climb is where I saw a lot of injuries happen to a lot of guys that let themselves go and then tried to climb back up into fight shape. Or if they just stayed active and not taken all that time away from the gym, they'd have probably been a lot better off. It's a common mistake I see in younger fighters.
Are you coaching it? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Derek. You still train much today? I mentioned I'm relatively new to the sport, so I have become a fan of the sport and a fan of a lot of these fighters of this generation. But talking to Derek over the years, he's obviously been a fan of the sport much longer than I have, but kind of getting a deeper interest in the sport and learning about pioneers like yourself. But I'd seen a while back that you had a heart attack, and then even more recently, you crashed in a drag racing accident.
Yeah.
So,
well, I certainly had some issues. 2019 in October, I had a heart attack. I was doing circuit training. I do a lot of circuit training. I do some light sparring. I don't do any grappling. Unfortunately, I would love to be competing in grappling and grappling on a regular basis. It's been a big part of my life since I was 10 years old. But the discs in my neck are tired of my crap. And I didn't want to keep grinding out camps and fighting until I had to have a surgery and a fusion. And then that affects the quality of the rest of your life. And so I walked away at 47 because I didn't want to have to keep jacking around with these discs in my neck from C4, C5 down to T1 are just worn out and tired of my crap. So as far as training now, I do a lot of circuit training. I do some light sparring with guys I know, because they're not out to prove anything training with me. I would love to be grappling, but it's one of those things you do or you don't do. You don't kind of do it half speed. You don't do it kind of halfway. So, but yeah, that's how it is. For me, I had to make a decision. It took me about a year to come up, to make friends with that decision and walk away from the sport. It's a huge piece of your identity and literally who you are. So thankfully I had acting and the gym and so many other things that I'd already built out of my 14 years fighting that gave me new purpose. I could focus on those things and I wasn't just floundering around wondering who the hell I am now that I'm not fighting.
That's awesome.
Do you still coach guys at all, or do you just?
Yeah, we have a great team. Eric Nixick and Dennis Davis do a great job at Extreme Couture. Since 2020, my son Ryan fought in Bellator mostly. He retired in 2020 to start his family. I've got two grandsons now, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I signed the gym over to him. He's running the gym now, and he's doing a great job with it. Dennis and him and Eric do an amazing job of running the team. And, the 650 members that we have that don't want to get punched in the face, they just want to be in shape and use MMA as their way to do that. And then about the 60 fighters that we have that are on the amateur team and the pro team that train in there, Misha Tate, Francis Nagano, Danny Inge, Brad Tavares. I mean, we've got a great group of athletes in there, both in the amateur ranks and the pro ranks, fighting for promotions across the board at Extreme Couture. So they've done a great job. When I retired and walked away from the sport, the gym kind of went through a little bit of a lull. And we lost Sean Tompkins, our head coach. And then, later we also lost Robert Paulus, who was our head coach after Sean. Dennis Davis and Eric Nixick have both stepped up and done a great job of filling the void for those two coaches that we lost at Extreme Couture, and bringing fight culture back and bringing that family atmosphere and that family mentality back to the gym after I walked away. So I'm proud and happy with what they've done in the gym. It's a great place. Whether you want to be a fighter and get punched in the face or not, or just want to be training in MMA, it's a great place to go.
Well, I know. So I know you have the gym, but you also have the Extreme Couture GI Foundation. Is that correct?
The GI Foundation, we started that in 2007. I wanted to find a way to give back. Since 9/11, a lot of our men and women that took the same oath I took in the U.S. Army have had to actually go out in the combat zone and put their ass on the line. And a lot of them get, come back beat up, both inside and outside. And Uncle Sam can't take care of all of them. So I got to go to Iraq in 2006 and spend 12 days on the ground with Rich Franklin, and went to 5 different FOBs in Iraq and met a bunch of soldiers in the combat zone fighting the fight. In 2007, I got to go to Walter Reed in Bethesda. We did a barbecue with Don Fry and Ken Shamrock at the Fisher House. And that was my first time going on the wards at Walter Reed and meeting a bunch of soldiers fresh off the battlefield. And almost to a man or woman, they lamented about the issues they were having financially, dealing with the VA, their caregivers, their wives, their moms, their dads that are spending an inordinate amount of time down there while they're in the hospital getting fixed up, losing their jobs, losing their houses, all this stuff. And it was infuriating that so many of our men and women were falling through the cracks. And we all know the stats. I mean, we're losing 22 a day to PTSD and suicide, which is ridiculous. So I wanted to do something to take that pressure off these men and women that have already sacrificed so much in their lives to take that oath and wear that uniform and fight the war on terror and all the things that they did. So not only raise awareness about what they go through when they come back and transition after they've been wounded, but take the financial pressure off of them. So we've created a website where any vet can go and fill out the paperwork in the portal. And if you've got bills that are on your back that are weighing you down and causing you stress in your life, show me those bills. We'll pay them and get them off your back. If you need counseling to deal with your PTSD or your TBI and all the things you saw and did while you were in the theater of combat, we'll get you set up with a counselor and help you navigate that world and that transition again. Put new tools in the tool belt so these guys stop looking down the wrong end of their pistols. It's that simple. So that's been our mission for 17 years now with the Extreme Couture GI Foundation. We've taken that one step further, and we run the Nevada chapter for MVP, Emerging Vets and Players, and giving retired athletes and any soldier in the community here in Las Vegas a gym to come train at. I got 50 or 60 vets that show up at my gym every Friday and get a workout in, and then sit on that mat in the huddle and talk about the things that are going well and let the demons out, let the things that are going bad out at the same time. Pretty amazing place to be in, pretty powerful situation. So very, very proud to be involved with those two organizations and try and help this veteran community. It was a big part of my life. Those 6 years I spent in that uniform from 82 to 88, in many ways made me who I am. So I'm in a different place in my life now, and I get to get back to that community.
Well, that is amazing, and we appreciate your service, but also, appreciate what you're doing for servicemen and women now also. So never stop giving. That's amazing. Amazing. It shows amazing character, which is what you've always been known for, is having just amazing character.
Well, thanks. Trying to do our part. We're a 100% give back organization. That's my staff and family and friends that want to be part of this mission and help. So I don't really have any overhead. Doesn't cost me anything to run this 501c3. Our only expense is whatever our events cost us, and we end up making a lot of money and giving a lot of money away to a lot of veterans, and which is what a 501c3 is supposed to be all about.
Well, that's awesome. We'll close out here in just a second at a few things. Firstly, we have a third co-host, but he He just couldn't bring himself to be here because he's a big Tito Ortiz fan, and he broke his heart.
You want me to spank him too, huh?
Yeah, so our co-host Law, couldn't be here because you literally spanked his hero.
Actually, Tito's a good friend, and Tito's doing very, very well. I'm very happy for Tito. He's moved to Florida. He's in Cape Coral. He started Tito's Cantina, which is an amazing Mexican restaurant there. And I've actually eaten there. It's really good food. He's got a lot of great tequila too there. So hopefully he's not spending too much time in the restaurant.
And secondly, before my mother is a huge Randy Couture fan also from back when I started watching. I think I was in 8th grade, and I'd run back to her bedroom and like, you got to see, and show her stuff on the internet or whatever. And oftentimes it was you. So when I told her you were going to be on our podcast, she was more excited than I was even. So if you could say hi to my mom, Robbie, she would love that.
Hi, Robbie. I hope you come to Vegas sometime. Come check us out at Extreme Couture. Come say hi.
Hey, speaking of going to Vegas, I'm 34 and I'm going to Vegas for the first time in January. Any recommendations for a first timer out there?
You know where you're staying?
I don't yet. Work's going to book it, but they haven't told us yet.
Yeah, lots of great hotels, lots of amazing food, and lots of amazing entertainment here in Vegas. Anybody who's anybody is eventually going to perform here in Vegas. I think the Eagles are playing at the Sphere right now. I don't know if you're an Eagles fan, but it's an amazing venue. The tickets are a little spendy, but the Sphere itself is an amazing experience. I saw U2 there, and they were incredible. I think you can't go wrong with any of the Cirque shows in town. I think if you do the Atomic Saloon or what's the other one? They're variety shows that are a bit raunchy, but they're hilarious and they're a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Opium is one that's really, really good. There's tons of great entertainment. I would recommend going to a speakeasy. There's one at the Cosmo called the Barbershop. One of my buddy's bands plays there. If Radio XX is playing there, they're one of the best cover bands in the 90s cover bands that I've ever heard. And they play that venue at the Barbershop. They also play at Caspian's at Caesars, which is another speakeasy. You got to kind of know where to go to find these things, but they're super cool and a great place to hang out, get a drink, and listen to some great music.
Awesome. I appreciate the advice there.
And my last question I got told to ask you is from my father-in-law. He said he looks like the type of guy that appreciates a tractor pull. Have you ever been to a tractor pull and do you enjoy that?
You're damn right I have. Been to a lot of rodeos and a lot of tractor pulls. They're a ton of fun. There's nothing more Americana than a good rodeo or a good tractor pull, to be honest.
He loves tractor pulls, so that's
hilarious. That's awesome.
Well, Randy, we appreciate all the time you've given us, and you've been more than kind to us. So we really appreciate it. Is there anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
Man, I appreciate you having me on. Connecting with you on social media and being willing to put yourself out there and ask me if I'm willing to do your podcast got us here. So that's on you guys. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Randy, very much.
You bet. Have a great day.
You too, sir.